Hello guys, welcome to another Source Gaming discussion. This is your host PushDustIn, and joining me today is NantenJex.
Hello.
And today we'll be discussing our expectations for the Breath of the Wild. Now, Breath of the Wild is releasing in a couple of days, and I think a lot of people's expectations are pretty high. I know I'm really looking forward to this, especially with the Switch coming out. What do you think about Breath of the Wild? Do you think it's gonna meet all those expectations?
Oh, well, I've heard mostly lofty expectations from it. I think the thing is, with Skyward Sword being the last mainline console Zelda game, and how it's been received post-launch, because pre-launch it was quite hyped up and it got quite good reviews. But its reception afterwards is, and everyone understands it's bad. So I think coming off of that, I don't see how Breath of the Wild could fail in any way. I don't see how it could be worse in people's eyes. And
so you don't think it could be as bad as Skyward Sword was?
No, because I think a lot of the problems that people had with Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild has already proven to us that it won't have. Now, Breath of the Wild could have new problems. Like, it's alright having a big, open, expansive world, but if there's nothing to do in it, then we've got some issues. And I know some people from the demo, at the very least, were complaining that the demo running from one spot to another took time and there wasn't really a whole lot to do during that time.
It kind of gives me flashbacks to Wind Waker.
Yeah.
With the open sea.
Yeah. Which, the open sea is not too bad when your sense of adventure is like that, especially because you can kind of just let the controller go and watch him go, but you can't do that in Breath of the Wild. You have to keep moving, so you have to keep concentrated. And if there's nothing to do, I can feel it can get even more taxing.
I think they did announce that there are teleportation.
Oh yeah,
you could teleport to some areas. But that's areas that you've been to.
Yeah, there'll definitely be quick travel. With a map that big, you have to have quick travel, and almost every Zelda game has had it. Even like Ocarina and Wind Waker and smaller ones, Link to the Past had quick travel. So, but Breath of the Wild. A lot of people are really excited for it. And when you look at all the trailers and stuff, especially the one that they showed at the Switch event, it's definitely up there for being one of the best Zelda games. But
do you think it's a little too early to say that? I mean, we don't have our hands on it yet.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I said it could possibly be. I didn't say it will be the best Zelda game.
Okay.
We do need to play it before we can make any sort of decisions. I mean, it looks like it's taking the best of a lot of its games from its past.
Yeah.
Like, the design is like a nice blend between Wind Waker and Ocarina that Skyward Sword tried to do but didn't quite reach. The character models and the voice acting and the enemy design and all stuff like that is all very Ghibli-esque and seems to appeal to pretty much all demographics. And the world looks very nice and the music sounds very, very good. I think it really does just come down to how old will this game get and how quickly will this happen. Like, if we are really running around a world, hunting and stuff, it'll be really fun for a bit. But then, just like what we saw with No Man's Sky, it'll eventually get really boring. And the one issue this game also has in regards to its story is, while its story does seem to be quite there and important, the very open-ended nature of it means that the story is going to be told in a very different way. You're going to have to go make your own way and discover the story on your own, and you can do it almost out of order. It really depends. I know the theory is that you unlock cutscenes from the story that you can access from the pause menu and watch if you want or ignore if you want. And talking to certain story-specific NPCs will trigger things. But other than that, you could completely ignore it. And that might let some people down if they're expecting a big epic storyline like we saw with Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess.
Yeah, I think one of the key story elements of Breath of the Wild seems to be what happened, I think it's 200 years ago?
I think it's just 100.
Oh, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So that kind of main story plot allows story to be told in parts, I think.
Yeah. Well, we get to see it from Link's perspective via flashbacks.
Yep.
And stuff like that. It really comes down to how paced the story is. Because like if you get like you could end up in a situation where loads of story is all told to you at once, and then you go hours without hearing anything else because of how you're playing the game, and it can make everything feel a little bit jarring. Or you have the problem where you spend like 75% of the game with no story, and then suddenly get all the cutscenes right at the very end, and it's a massive like exposition tidal wave all coming at you at once, and that I feel could let some people down.
Yeah, and I think Breath of the Wild is a very appropriate name for the title, because I think one thing that the developers are really hoping for is that the players will have a sense of connection to the world itself. And hoping that the world will build that kind of game that players are expecting, or kind of cater to everyone's expectations. But as you mentioned, people can be playing it differently and have very different experiences.
Right. And I really think whether it's going to live up to expectations or not, it's going to come down to what sort of Zelda you like and how you perceive yourself playing this game. So, for example, I've got one of the rare instances where I've got a friend who isn't excited for this game. In fact, he thinks it looks pretty bad, and by his own standards and stuff. And while I don't see it, he's going in there with basically no expectations, and expecting this big open world with nothing to do in it, and the story barely being told. And it's just if it is like that, he knows, even though he has no expectations, he's gonna consider it the worst Zelda game because it doesn't reach everything he expects from a Zelda game. And we're all right with doing something different, and you could argue that Breath of the Wild isn't doing something different; it's going back to its traditions. But when you really look at the Zelda games, how many of them really are open exploration is very limited. A good example, I think, is if you look at what Nintendo did recently with the 3D Mario games, there was like, here's your open-ended 3D Mario games, and here's your linear 3D Mario games.
Yep.
And the linear ones were the 3D series, and the Galaxy ones and the open world one was 64 Sunshine and Odyssey. If we did the same thing with the Zelda games, and said, here is your linear story-driven Zelda games, and here's your open exploration Zelda games, there isn't really much in the open exploration one. You have the original Zelda, and then you're going to have Breath of the Wild, and then you could make arguments that Zelda 2 and A Link Between Worlds are open exploration Zelda games. But the rest of them really aren't. I mean, they're big open worlds for you to explore, sure, but they, with their design and with the story focus, they point you in what direction you need to go.
I see what you're saying.
You can't do the dungeons particularly out of order unless it's by accident. Take A Link to the Past, for example. Like, you could do some of them dungeons out of order, but many of them required items that you could only find within the dungeons to then do it the next one. Like, you had a couple, but that was about it. Ocarina of Time kinda has this. You can technically beat the fire and water dungeons before you beat the grass dungeon, as long as you get the bow and arrow first and then leave. But the Shadow Temple in that game can't be done until the first 3 are all done.
Yeah.
And so it drives the player towards the story it wants to tell. And a lot of people clearly like that. I mean, there's a reason Ocarina of Time is heralded as like the greatest Zelda. But Breath of the Wild looks to be breaking from that. And I think with people being so used to the story-driven style that has existed for the past... Well, what, since A Link to the Past... No, since Zelda 2, let's say, because you really can't do that one out of order either. You need to get the magic from each dungeon in order to get to the next part. So, for 30 years, the last 30 years, there's basically been story-driven Zelda games, rather than open exploration ones.
So really, this is kind of a new territory for Nintendo.
Yeah, they're trying to take what they captured with the first Zelda and make it and bring it into the 3D, which is fine for those fans of that, but I think a lot of people aren't that sort of style. I mean, Aonuma said in that interview with Game Informer, I believe, that he can't play the original Zelda game, and part of that's probably due to technical reasons. But as the producer of all these linear designed Zelda games, I wonder if that open-ended exploration aspect of it, with such limited hardware, is a bit... it doesn't jive well with him, and I feel like a lot of people might end up with that problem as well if they don't realize
the original
what sort of
Zelda,
game
there's
they're playing.
really limited hints on where to go. And I think Breath of the Wild, they have shown that there's some hints on where to go next.
Oh.
If you want to play in a linear fashion, then I think there is the possibility to do that with Breath of the Wild, at least as far as we've seen so far.
Yeah, and if they've designed it in such a clever way where you can talk to people and they're like, oh, like, say the old man on the Great Plateau, once you get out of the Great Plateau and he's like, oh, you should head towards the forest first. And if you head towards the forest, then story stuff picks up naturally and it feels like a natural flow. Then, yeah, I think it'll appeal to the people who just want to do that. And then if you want to just leave, if he says go to the forest and you decide, no, I'm going to Death Mountain instead, you're breaking out of the pattern and the story might get jarbled, but if you're doing that, you're the sort of person who wants that exploration anyway.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how they've designed the game, because I can't say for certain until I've actually played it and seen for myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it will take a couple of playthroughs to really see how the game really is structured.
Yeah. And I feel like it's such a different, quote-unquote, different way of playing Zelda.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have high expectations from the trailer, the fact that it's been in development for dog's years. Like, a lot of people are expecting the greatest thing since sliced bread. And I think that, I think it can live up to them expectations. I honestly do think that the game could very well be one of the best Zelda games we've ever played and a great start for the Switch. But I think people should be aware that their view of how they might want to play a Zelda might not be how this game works because it's different. Like, Nintendo have been trying different things with their IPs to some success and some detriment over the past few years. You have
like Federation Force.
Yeah, Federation Force, Triforce Heroes, Ziplash. They all took established IPs and put them in a different setting.
Well, I would argue that Triforce Heroes was an extension of Four Swords Adventure.
Right, but even Four Swords Adventure is really just a spin-off of this mainline Zelda series. And while Breath of the Wild isn't something brand new to Zelda because of the first game, and Link Between Worlds kind of also being somewhat open-ended for the second half. First half's pretty linear, but the second half, when you...
Yeah, once Ravio.
Yeah, once you have full access to all items, then you can start exploring wherever you want.
So anyway, Breath of the Wild will have be the first for a lot of things. It will be the first Zelda game to really have full-on voice acting. Do you think that will live up to the hype?
Not really. To be honest, I'd much rather they had spoken in Hylian and had it be gibberish voice acting than actual voice acting. Because I've already got my qualms with some of them. I don't think Zelda's voice sounds that great in any of the languages, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, I like the Japanese one in the trailer more than the English one, but they both had issues at points. But
I didn't like the Japanese crying.
Yeah. But like the old man from the little bits we have heard and what we are assuming to be Impa, they sound fine. So I think it's going to be like most games where some characters are going to be really good and some characters are going to be really poor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind is that Breath of the Wild wasn't really developed for the Switch in mind. It was developed for the Wii U first and foremost. So I wonder how it will play on the Switch.
I don't think it will...
I'm sure it will run fine and, perfectly, but I'm wondering, like, did they have to sacrifice anything for that change?
I doubt it. I mean, the difference, unlike the GameCube and the Wii, where the control scheme drastically changed, the only thing they really have to accommodate for with the Switch version is its portability.
Hmm.
But from what I've gathered, they've done a fine job of it. I mean, when it's slightly portable, you have to think about like adding, a bit more places to save and stuff like that. I'm not quite sure how they do saving in Breath of the Wild. I don't know if it's like Ocarina of Time where it's just done through the pause menu, or Majora's Mask.
I think
where
that
it's
would probably
done
make
through
the most
statues.
sense.
But yeah, if you can save at any point, then it becomes a moot point that's an issue. So there's nothing particularly... The lack of HD Rumble on Breath of the Wild, I'm sure, is disappointing, but as it was a Wii U title, I completely understand.
Okay. And do you have high hopes for the DLC that was announced?
I need to see more of it. I'm not going to go on the big ranty bandwagon that I've seen a lot of people do. I mean, if the Elder Scrolls games can get DLC, I don't understand why Zelda can't. It's just because they haven't done it before. Now, what these hard mode and the trial of whatever it's called, Trial of Heroes or whatever, what that is, I'm going to need to see first. If the Trial of Heroes is like something that was like the Amiibo dungeon, then, which probably is what it sounds like it is, I don't mind, as long as there's something of an equivalent status already in the game. Like, if this is like an extra thing, because I feel like that's something that's been in pretty much all the 3D Zelda games since Wind Waker. Wind Waker had it, Twilight Princess had it, Skyward Sword kind of had it, but also had a boss rush mode. Like, yeah, let's say if there's a boss rush mode in Breath of the Wild somehow, and then they have this trail as DLC, I don't mind so much, as long as it's not removing something. And hard mode's the same. If hard mode is like a proper hard mode, like Master Quest style, where they've actually changed some things up and isn't just the generic hero mode where enemies do twice the amount of damage and you don't get as much health or whatever.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat interesting.
Yeah, then I won't mind it. But if it's the same if it's the same thing where it's just a couple of stats have been tweaked here and there, and they're now selling it, that's going to rub me the wrong way.
Yeah, understandably. Yeah. I feel the same way.
Yeah. The Winter DLC, I'm fine with, and I know some people have been complaining about the Switch shirt maybe ruining immersion. That doesn't bother me. I mean, you just don't use it, Like, you don't even have to open the chest. You already going to know that there's a Switch shirt there. Just pretend the shirt's not there, or it's a chest you can't open.
I think there's 3 chests, and 2 of them have items.
Yeah, 2 of them have useful items. I can only assume that that's, like, you get the fire rod early or something.
Maybe.
Like,
I'm going to guess it's something that helps with quick travel.
Maybe. Like, I could see one being a combat item and one being something different. I don't know, the speedy sailcloth or something like that.
Extra fast boots.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any thoughts before we wrap this up?
It's going to be hard to avoid spoilers. I can't guarantee that I'm going to be playing it in a few days. So I may be waiting until towards the end of March to play it, which means I'm going to have to go on full lockdown because I don't want anything spoiled. I've stopped watching any of the new trailers, and the last thing I listened to about it was that Game Informer interview, and that was it. Now I'm going, everything else from this point on is going to be blind with me. I haven't listened to any of the... I haven't read any of the Game Informer articles and stuff. I know they revealed the first boss and stuff. I haven't done any of that, so
we'll see. We'll see how it actually plays out. Okay. We'll definitely write a full review on Source Gaming once we get our hands on it.
Yes.
So please check that out. And we'll be doing a couple of live streams where we'll be playing it over the internet, so I hope you guys join us for that. Stay subscribed to Source Gaming for more videos and podcasts. Links to NantenJex social media as well as mine will be in the description below.
Have a nice evening or day or whatever time it is when you're listening to this.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Enjoy.